Number one is practice alone. Now, that's a theme that we're going to carry throughout this presentation. If you are an individual who has Asperger syndrome, one of the challenges that you face is the ability to speak socially in public, not before a crowd, but just to some individual, random individual, maybe even a friend or family member. It just doesn't come out right. Why? Because something is happening neurologically in your mind that makes you inhibited, that makes it very difficult for you to think rationally and clearly like you normally would when you are alone. So what to do? Well, start to practice and do it. I suggest that you practice alone. Now, there is a thing that is called neuroplasticity. So let's understand. Well, first of all, let me give you kind of a definition of what that is. It is the brain's ability to modify, change, and adapt both structure and function throughout life in response to experience. So the analogy is this. Imagine you are out walking in the woods. You're walking somewhere that no one else has walked before, except maybe some Indians in the past. You're following this Indian trail. But then you find that this is a good way to go. All right, so next time you come out of the woods, you follow the same trail. But what you notice is that because you're following the same trail, it becomes more and more obvious because you're treading down, the foliage or whatever. But as you and others begin to use the trail more frequently, well, then it becomes eventually a dirt road. Somebody learned to take their mountain bike down this road, or maybe their little four-wheeler, their all-terrain vehicle. So it's becoming more and more pronounced. Well, along comes the county engineers, and they said, man, this guy's got a good idea. Let's pave this and make it more than just a road. Let's make it, or a path, trail. Let's make it a road. This would be a good place for vehicles to go down. And a little bit later, the state comes along, or maybe the federal government, and they say, wow, this would be a great place to put an extension to an interstate highway. So it turns out that what began as an Indian trail is now an interstate highway. That's kind of how your brain works. That's how neuroplasticity works. You begin at training it. You're literally training your brain. You are literally changing the neuron paths in your brain. So what was something that was just woods, basically unrecognizable as anything more than an old trail that hasn't been used in 100 years. Well, in your brain, there's this path that, it's there. You know how to speak in public to individuals because you've done it before, but it's not well worn at all. But you need to put that practice into it. So we say what you need to do is practice alone. Now, the reason that we say practice alone is not just because people think you're nuts if you're out there talking, practicing speaking amidst the public, but also the very thing that you're having trouble with is speaking to people out in the public because of those inhibitions that we talked about earlier. But when you're home alone, you don't have those inhibitions slowing you down or holding you back. That's the best place to practice. So that's kind of the starting point. Have you ever heard anybody that they're just difficult to understand? They're loud enough, but they just kind of mumble. Their words aren't put together articulately so you can actually understand what they're saying. You can hear them fine, you just no idea. And they're speaking your language, but you have no idea what they said because they're not articulating. So that is the objective, to get to that point where we can overcome the fear, where we can overcome the inhibition, the self-consciousness, where we can speak to other individuals with confidence and with clarity. So they know exactly what we want. And the benefits to that, I think, should be obvious because it is so important for us to be able to communicate accurately and articulately with other individuals because we just have to. We need to. It's very important for our survival to get ahead in life. Well, number two is this, just very briefly, you might want to practice by imitating someone else. Now, this someone else, and again, all of these, we're talking about doing this alone, at least for now. But can you think of an individual that you have heard speak, maybe a friend, family member, and they're very articulate. They're easy to understand. They even come across maybe as a little bit charismatic or a lot charismatic. And you are impressed by the way this person speaks. Well, when you're home alone, try to imitate that person. Now, it doesn't have to be somebody you know. Maybe it's somebody that you heard on television, the internet, maybe you watched a film on Netflix, wherever, and there's this person who just had this particular personality that you found was likable, and you would kind of like to maybe not imitate that person when you're out and about in public, but you'd like to pick up a little trace of that charisma. Well, the thing to do is just in your mind, home alone, where nobody thinks you're crazy, just practice being that person. Speak as if you were that person. Imagine how that person looks, how that person carries themselves, how they present themselves. You do the same thing, home, all alone, or maybe in your car when you are all alone. Years ago, I had a friend. He was like, I don't know, maybe 10 years older than me. So I was like a teenager. He's an adult. But one of his passions in life was auctioneering. And one of the ways he honed his skill was he would practice when he was driving his car. But back in, the 50s and 60s, air conditioning was not nearly as prevalent as it is today, so he'd practice with his windows rolled down. And he'd say occasionally he'd pull up to a stoplight and somebody would buy something. He's joking, but people would hear him talking and they'd yell out, "Sold," or something like that. Okay, I'm a little too inhibited to do that, and even if I wasn't inhibited, I don't think I'd do that. But the point is, yeah, that's a good way to practice when you're alone in your vehicle. Number three is this: practice with strangers. All right, now this is where you get outside your house. This is where you get outside your car. This is where you get outside the safety and protection of being alone. Now you're going to try this on real live people. So you may say something like, I don't know, you might just say, "Hi." I mean, how hard is that? Now keep in mind the problem that people with Asperger syndrome often have, and other people who are just shy or timid or withdrawn, the problem they have is just getting over that initial fear. And as you get older, I think it comes a little bit easier, but to others, not as quickly as most people. So you still got to practice. At some point, you got to get out of boot camp and onto the battlefield. And this is where that begins. Very slow, very in an environment that is not so terribly intimidating, where you're not so inhibited, but just say hi. Or just say good morning. But before you do it, you need to get, this is my suggestion, you need to get this idea in your brain. And that idea is you need to decide that you are going to have fun. You need to say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to make a game out of this. I'm going to enjoy it. So go up to a complete stranger. It doesn't matter. You've never seen him before. You're never going to see him again. And maybe just somebody you happen to be passing when you're out and about, maybe at the grocery store, wherever you happen to go, and just say, "Hi." Say, well, what happens if they don't respond? Doesn't matter. You're not going to see them again anyhow. Well, what if they think I'm crazy? Same thing. First of all, nobody's going to think you're crazy if you say hi. Well, maybe a few people, but by and large, just practice, and don't let it bother you. You're just having fun. You're playing a game. You're seeing who will say hi back, and just count them. I'm going to say hi to as many people as I possibly can when I'm out and about today. Doesn't matter where they are. I might even sneak up behind them and say hi. Okay, you may not want to do that, but you may. Whatever. But just count how many people responded and how they responded. Did they respond positively? You know what? You're going to be surprised How many people, when you initiate a simple conversation, respond positively? It's absolutely amazing because it depends on where you live, but particularly in urban areas, people are not accustomed to other people being friendly, to being out and open with themselves. So say hi. Now, you've gotten really good at saying hi. Right now, you can say good morning. I like to say good morning because people look at me funny because, and I made a game. I make a game out of it because I do it all the time. Doesn't matter what the time of day is. So, I'll be at the, like Menards or whatever, and I'll walk up to the cashier and I'll say good morning. It's 8 o'clock at night. And typically, they will respond by saying good morning right back without even thinking about the time. But sometimes they'll catch you and they say it's not morning, it's afternoon. And okay, you just initiated a conversation. So my response is, well, it's just easier to say good morning than it is to say good afternoon or good evening. So I say good morning. And they kind of think that's funny. But what we're doing here is we're practicing getting into that mode of conversation where we're less inhibited, where we really feel comfortable in our own skin. And again, we got the superhighway going. Now, where are you in your superhighway? Are you at the point where you are just becoming a dirt road? Are you becoming a paved road? Are you near the end where you're about to make a superhighway where you can converse with others with confidence? Don't know. That's up to you. But what I do know is this. You got to start. At some point, you got to begin. You got to start making that trail. Number 4 is this, and I find this very, very helpful in controlling the chatter that's inside your brain. I shouldn't call it chatter. To me, it's more like static. It's like confusion inside my head. But if I stop before I speak to somebody, and often this is in response to their hello, what I will do is I will count to 3. Just like that. They will say hello, and I'll turn around, take a deep breath, and count to 3. What is that doing? Well, in that short amount of time, what I find personally in my experience, and here I am pushing 70 years old. I mean, I'm getting closer every day. So are you, by the way. But what I'm learning is how to communicate with people. And over these 70 years, I've learned a thing or two. The reason that I make these videos is I just like to share with people those things that I've learned through life experience. So wherever you are in life, child, you might be a teenager, maybe adult, young adult, middle-aged adult, or senior like me. I've been there. I've been down that same path, and I'm just showing you, telling you what I've learned along the way, and hopefully that will be beneficial. So take a deep breath, count to 3, and what you are doing, or what I have found happens in my life is I am unscrambling some of that static in my brain. Now, you will notice that when I'm talking, even when I'm making these videos with nobody around, still that scrambling is still there. I still stumble over some of my words, even though I've done this a lot. So there's always more practice to do. Now, some people may say, Ken, when you do that, why don't you stop and start over? Well, because it would take me all day to make a 20-minute video or 10-minute video, however long it happens to take. So number 4 is take a deep breath, count to 3 when someone speaks to you to collect your thoughts. I mean, literally get your ducks in a row inside your head. Okay, I said literally. I actually don't literally have ducks in my head. They don't need to be in a row, so figuratively get my ducks in a row. Number 5 is projection. Now, we talked earlier about mumbling, but what about if you can't talk loud enough? So the person who mumbles, they're talking loud enough, but their words aren't formed correctly, so you can't really efficiently hear what they're saying. But now we're talking about projection. So we're loud enough that the other individual can actually hear what you say. The way that I do this, and I recommend that maybe you do this, is imagine that standing behind this person to whom you are speaking, that there is a person 5 feet behind them. And you are not talking to this person, but you are talking to the person behind them. What that will do is that will help you to project. Just that simple mental trick. Well, it helps me tremendously. Number 6 is this: project confidence with a smile or with some other facial gesture. May raise your eyebrows, may cock your head a little bit. You may, raise your shoulders, do something other than focus on your voice. Well, why are you doing that? Because when you make those other gestures, for example, I may take my hands and go kind of like this, or just kind of clasp them like this, or maybe I'll cross my arms, or I'll do something when I'm talking to these people that takes my brain's concentration off my voice and places it somewhere else. What that does is that makes me feel in control because I'm controlling my hands or my arms or my face when I smile. Or if I raise my eyebrows, whatever I happen to be doing, that puts me in a mindset that I'm in control. And the reason often it's so hard to articulate is because we don't feel in control, because those autonomous portions of our brain are working against us that are making us self-conscious, that are making us focus on something other than what we're supposed to be doing, like fear. So we are now taking control just by moving parts of our body. May even, stand up on your toes briefly for a second or whatever, and as long as it doesn't look weird or odd or out of place, yeah, that gives you that feeling of control. All right, that takes us to number 7. Now you're in control. This time you're not just responding to questions or comments from others, hello from others. You're not just saying hi or whatever, but you are now taking it a step further. So we're getting closer to that superhighway, and what you're doing now is asking questions. Now, this is a principle that I hope everybody comes to grasp, and that is the individual who asks questions controls the conversation. Everyone who has ever engaged in debate understands this. The person who asks questions controls the conversation. So come to a point where you are comfortable asking questions. Now, if you are a person with Asperger syndrome, or you have some other what I call mind-scrambling condition or trait, this may not come easy the first few times you try it, because you are not a conversationalist. You don't like small talk to begin with. But let me reiterate what I said earlier. It is sometimes necessary for our own well-being to be able to communicate accurately and articulately. So on the path to the roadway, to the path to the superhighway, one thing we have to learn to do is to initiate or control the conversation. Got to do that. It may be uncomfortable at first, but remember what we talked about. That ability of our brain to renew itself, not physically renew itself, but to build those pathways. So you're going to do that simply by asking questions. This works so very well because what you're doing is you're taking the load of the conversation off yourself and onto the other person, but at the same time, you're taking control, at least partial control. So if it's a complete stranger, it depends on the circumstances, if it's appropriate, but you might say, so what do you do for a living? Or where do you live? How do you like this weather? I typically don't talk about weather because, quite frankly, I already know how the weather is, so does the other guy, and I guess that's better than just being quiet, but sure, ask him about the weather if you feel comfortable doing it. Number 8 is this. This works very well for Aspies, and if you're not a person with let me put it this way, if you don't have the benefit or the benefits of having the Asperger traits, you may not be able to identify with this quite as readily as a person with Asperger syndrome. Depends on who you are. But number 8 is tone down your vocabulary. That may be a bit challenging for a person with Asperger syndrome because we tend to speak a different language. And in our language, we have words that are not in the other person's language. Now, you're saying, yeah, we all speak English. Those words I use are English words. Doesn't matter if they don't understand the terms we're using, it may as well be in a foreign language. They don't understand it. So some people call these big words, but sometimes they're not big, they're just unfamiliar. They're familiar to you, they may be familiar to your circle of friends, but to other people, they got no idea what that word means. Why are you even using it? Now, the reason we want to tone down our vocabulary is not just so we can be more articulate and more easily understood, but sometimes people think that's a little bit odd. They think it's a little bit weird, but more seriously, sometimes they think that we are a little bit aloof, that we are doing that intentionally, that we are purposefully and willfully using words that they don't understand so we can feel superior. That troubles people often, and sometimes they will actually snap back at us. So go ahead, try to articulate, but tone down some of the unfamiliar words. Tone down your vocabulary. Now you will see on the screen a couple rectangle boxes. If you want this conversation to keep on going, we got some great conversations that you can remain engaged in, so just click on one of those boxes. But if you're done, well, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see y'all next time.